Well, hello and welcome to CBN News Live here on the YouTube channel. I'm Dan Andros, and I'm joined by CBN's David Brody for this episode of Campaign Catch-Up. We've been doing this a couple times a week to kind of get you up to speed on everything that's going on with the presidential race between Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. David, glad you're here. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you, Dan. As always, boy, this is becoming a regular occurrence, Dan.
I know it is. I mean, and look, we're getting down the home stretch here, and there's a lot to get to. You have some big interviews coming up. I want to talk about that. You also think maybe the debate, even though we kind of declared it DOA at this point, another debate not happening, but you think maybe there's still a glimmer that this could actually end up changing. So we'll get into all of that in a minute here, but I want to start with the big interview from last night. Kamala Harris goes on MSNBC with Stephanie Ruhle, and I mean, no surprise. I mean, Harris has been getting hit for not doing very many interviews at all, really, and her press conferences just kind of essentially mimicking the Biden 2020 basement campaign strategy, so to speak. So, anyway, she has this interview with Ruhle. What was your reaction to that?
Well, look, it's easy to take pot shots, right? So let's stay away from the pot shots and let's just go to what we heard. And Dan, the truth of the matter is there's no observer in America, I mean, unless you're way off the reservation on the left, that can see that interview and think anything but that it was an utter disaster. It continues to be every time. Why? There's so many reasons. First of all, she's not answering any of the questions. And by the way, don't take my word for it. Just talk to Stephanie Ruhle, who did the interview, who spoke with Nicole Wallace on MSNBC afterwards and said, quote, she didn't answer the question. And so, look, it's a disaster. I mean, you got to be better than this. I mean, just from a politics 101, Dan, campaign strategy, you got to have more in the arsenal. You got to. I mean, this is not city council in podunk, heartland America, so to speak. And I don't say that in a negative way. I'm just saying, right, generic city out there. This is for the president of the United States. And she was asked specifically about her economic plan. And she went back to dreams and hopes and aspirations. She talked about, and then she did it again with this whole idea of like, well, what if you are not one of these people that buys into your any sort of your economic philosophy? She's like, well, as long as you have, here we go, Dan, a dream, a hope, and an aspiration. What is she talking about? And then apparently she learned a new word called holistically because she used it 3 times in the matter of 30 seconds where everything is holistically. Dan, she's not saying anything. She's just, I mean, it's frustrating. I mean, I'm frustrated. I mean, I'm not a Democrat or Republican in terms of like, the analysis. I'm just a political observer. You've got to be frustrated that you see something like this and it's train wreck after train wreck. This is what she does. She talked about corporate tax rates, saying that they've got to go higher. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. That's how you're going to pay for stuff? Well, maybe the Republican Senate, which is about to be a Republican Senate, will have something to say about increasing corporate tax rates. Because if that's your plan, that ain't going to happen. And then she started talking about everybody's got to pay their fair share. And it just became just the same old stuff. We're hearing nothing new. And this is a major problem for her.
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about last time, you as in a race like this, it's each campaign is trying to define their opponent, and you don't, and then each person running doesn't want to let the opponent define them, and it seems like by continually, essentially, not really saying anything, it's opening the door for Trump to sort of do that. And at what point do people who are actually struggling out there? I mean, I think. It was interesting in the interview because it was clearly so many of the questions lobbed were sort of in a softball way. Like, hey, you've had such a great wins on the economy, but people still don't seem to understand that all of those great accomplishments, like that's how the question was framed. And I'm thinking, all right, if, all the Americans out there that are paying what they are for groceries and gas, et cetera, are watching this, I think to your point, they didn't hear anything that's going to help them. I mean, yeah, we all have hopes and dreams about achieving things, but what are you going to do? And yeah, and this is my sticking point here, David, is when does the press sort of push for more answers on this thing? I mean, when do they start, when Biden it was clear after the debate that, that whole situation, what was clear the press went into press mode. Like, we actually had a press for a couple weeks there where they were like, what is going on here? We need answers on this. This, like you said, is for the presidency of the United States. At what point do we ever see this press kick into gear? Even left-leaning press who may say, hey, like, maybe they're biased to the left, but maybe they think she needs to explain this stuff if people are going to want to vote for her. And so whatever the motivation might be, do you expect to see the press actually start to push for her to give some clarity on her positions on these things?
Absolutely not. They're going to give some lip service to it. Look, here's the dirty little secret. The press, well, this is not the secret part, that the press is liberal. Right. The dirty little secret is that they're okay with the fact that she's talking about hope and joy and being the anti-Trump candidate. They're okay with that. That is satisfactory in terms of a better way for America. And even if it doesn't involve much policy, that's good enough for them. It just is. And that's really sad. It's a sad state of journalism that we have to say that. But speaking about journalism, Dan, I've said this before and I'll say it again. We are in the age of the correspondent. And we saw it rear its ugly head last night. What do I mean by that? Stephanie Ruhle playing correspondent. I'm anchor. I'm correspondent. I'm going to ask the tough questions. No, you're not. You're not a correspondent. You're a pundit. How do I know she's a pundit? Because the other day, about a week ago, she was on Bill Maher's show talking about basically Kamala Harris doesn't have to really answer many of these questions because being against Trump is the whole deal. That's good enough. So she's in Kamala Harris's corner. Once again, not my analysis, her words. So how are you a pundit on Bill Maher and then trying to do this, quote, hard-hitting interview, which we know it wasn't. But even if it wasn't a hard-hitting interview, why is she getting an interview at all? A softball interview. Well, the answer is Kamala Harris and her team want to conceal or basically avoid any hard-hitting questions because they're living in the age of the correspondent. And that's what's going on today. And it's a disservice to Americans. It's a disservice to voters because people that are low propensity, that don't understand kind of who Stephanie Ruhle is and that they didn't catch Bill Maher, I'm telling you, this is all propaganda. It's fake. It's all fake. Yeah. Dan, it is. It just is.
Now, David, you have an interesting interview coming up. A couple of interesting interviews. One with Chris Coons, who's essentially I don't know what you'd actually call him, but basically not a spokesperson, but part of the Harris Walz campaign, right? Stumping for them. Mm-hmm. So you have that interview coming up there. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but would you it would be interesting to see you get to ask questions to Kamala Harris. I don't know if you put in the request yet or not for that, but have you? That would be quite interesting to me to watch that one go down.
Well, breaking news. Yes, I have put in the request. And how do I say this? It's marching slowly, hopefully towards victory. More to be reported on here in a few weeks. But look, let me be clear back to the correspondent stuff. I mean, I kind of fit into that in a way, but not really. I'm not one of those people that claims to be a correspondent. My role. My title is chief political, not reporter. My role is chief political analyst. I analyze, and I asked for that change of title on purpose at CBN. They granted that to me because CBN knows that the truth matters. And I think it's important that people understand that when I'm asking questions, I'm coming at it from an analytical point of view. That there is actual, people would call it commentary, I'll call it analysis, but there is analysis within my questions. That's fair. I have no problem with the Joy Reids and the and the Sean Hannitys because we know they're on prime time and we know where they stand. The issue I have is with the Anderson Coopers and the Wolf Blitzers and others of the world who and Jake Tapper who like to claim that they're the Mr. J on the chest with journalism, and they're not. They're not. And I make very clear that I'm not trying to play Jake Tapper, so to speak. I'm an analyst. I'm not an anchor reporter who's going to be the journalistic guy that's going to specifically ask all of those type questions. Am I going to ask those questions? Yes. Will I ask them from an analytical standpoint? Yes. And I think that does a service to the viewer. So anyhow, in answer to your question, yeah, we have a potential interview maybe with Kamala Harris coming up. We hope. We don't know. But I will be interviewing Senator Chris Coons later today. We stamp this. What is it, about Thursday, about 1 p.m.? I'll do this in about an hour or so. We'll air it on CBN at some point here in the next day or two, early next week as well, to talk about Kamala Harris and really more about from a faith perspective, because we're going to kind of delve into that, but also policy too. We have Laura Trump coming up as well, and Ben Carson as well. So we've got a lot going on.
Yeah, looking for all those, and a story on the Teamster union vote that happened here that we talked about last one. So yeah, a lot on your plate coming up. Looking forward to all that. All right, let's shift gears a little bit here. We had this indictment, New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Now, this is really interesting because he's claiming that this is essentially lawfare, and he's being targeted because he spoke out as all the migrants are flooding into New York City, and he's just like, we can't deal with this. This is crazy. And he's saying that this is essentially retribution for that. Is this going to expand beyond New York and become, I would imagine that Trump maybe is certainly got his eye on this. I'm just wondering if this is going to spill into the campaign here.
I think it definitely will spill into the campaign. I mean, once again, this is about alleged bribery charges as it relates to him taking certain benefits from the Turkish government, for whether it be Turkish Airlines and other flights and freebies, if you will, which affected New York in terms of giving them lenient treatment. That's kind of like the overall Justice Department indictment. Having said that, 100%, especially because it has to do with immigration, it'll get into the campaign. But it's interesting because if you watch this roll out, at first, before Eric Adams made a statement, conservative media was all abuzz with clips of Eric Adams calling out the Biden administration for saying basically, what in the world are you doing to me? You're killing me here in New York with sending all the illegal immigrants my way. Though, let's be clear, Eric Adams, I mean, it is a sanctuary city. I mean, he did. So, there's some responsibility there. But it cost the city $5 billion in 1 year. $5 billion. They've had to cut services left and right. I grew up in New York. It is not the same. I've been back a couple of times. I don't ever want to go back. I mean, it's totally different. So he's frustrated and he's spoken out. And therefore, my point is that you saw conservative media do it and you go, okay, well, let's kind of take a breath. Let's kind of see where this is going. And then all of a sudden, Eric Adams is now coming out and saying that. And so it kind of goes to the weaponization issue. It kind of goes to this idea of two-tiered system of justice. It kind of goes to the Biden Harris administration in terms of how they dole out justice and all of that, all of those themes, if you will. So I think Trump will definitely play into it for sure.
All right, now let's again shift a little gears here. Every time we do this episode, we take a look at the polls. We kind of peek in and see what's going on. And last we talked here earlier this week, it was pretty much in that toss-up zone. Trump, I think, had the battleground states were very, very close. So again, I know these things come out pretty regularly. Anything new to report there on the polling front?
Here, 3 words, Dan: margin of error. That's pretty much what it's been for a while now, and I expect it to be pretty much the same, unless we have an October surprise, or in this case, in this election, it might be surprises, plural.
Yeah.
At this point, no, I think this is margin of error stuff. I've looked at the latest polls, whether it be Real Clear Politics or certain ones. It's either Trump up +1, let's say Arizona, that's one of the latest ones, or Kamala Harris up 2 in Michigan. Look. Bottom line is we're going to be a broken record by the time this is all over. I think the question is, what will the record be playing on election night and after election night? Because I'm not quite sure it's all going to be over on election night. It could be. And what I mean by that is that the polls may be off. Remember, Trump has always been underestimated in the polls. So we wait for that. A couple of things that stick out to me specifically in the polls. We've talked about this briefly, but the black vote in America, typically a Democrat needs to get about 87 to 90% of the black vote in America. Obama got 95%. That was off the rails, but typically it's 87 to 90%. Kamala Harris is right now at about 84%. She's 3% down under that number. She's got to get that up. That's a problem. Hispanics also. Donald Trump is only down 11 with Hispanics overall. That's a problem for the Harris campaign. So if you look at all of that, I think you've got some issues there if you're the Harris campaign. Now, having said that, Donald Trump has got to win men. Specifically, he won the male vote by 11 points in 2016. He only won the mail vote by 1 point in 2020. Quite frankly, it was pretty much a wash. It was 49-48 roughly. So the point is he lost 11 points among men from 2016 to 2020. He's got to get that number back up. So that's something we'll be watching too.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to throw in there on where he's targeting, the groups he's targeting, he did finally mention Christians, and he said, hey, Christians need to get out and vote. And so, I mean, what he's referring to is, yeah, there are a lot of Christians heavily kind of sway towards the Republican side of things in these presidential campaigns, evangelical Christians anyway. And so, but it's a big dependency for, if it matters for them, how many people come out. So he's urging the Christians to come out and vote. Did you see that clip as well?
Yeah, I did. And you're absolutely right. And he's also right. And so are all of the pundits who say, I say the pundits, really more the researchers who say Christians typically don't come out and vote. I mean, the truth of the matter is we always talk about, oh, the evangelical vote is huge. Okay, well, it is in the sense that it can help elect a president. But at the same time, could you imagine if all of the evangelicals came out? And I'm talking about conservative evangelicals because those are typically more prominent in American politics. When I say all of them, okay, not all of them are going to come out, but I mean about 1/3 of them come out. What about one more third to make it 2/3? What about a half? It would be a no contest in this country. But there's so many evangelical Christians that sit on the wayside. And, I know a lot of Christians out there say, well, I'm just going to leave it up to God. It's God's will. Hey, you know what? God's will includes free will. God's will includes our free will, which means we have decisions we have to make prayerfully about which candidate and what issues to support. And I think that's part of the equation here.
Absolutely. All right. So last thing I want to get to here, I mentioned at the top, last episode here of this segment, we sort of talked about the debate that was Trump said no, kind of looked like that thing was not happening. But you think there might be a slight opening for that to actually be reversed?
I do. I think it's speculative, obviously. I don't have any hard information on this. But having said this, I've known Trump for about 15 years, interviewed him over 30 times, and met with him privately quite a few times. I have a sense of how he operates, and it's always been the art of the deal. So I think what he was doing was throwing down a marker at the beginning to say, no more, that's it, no debates, hoping that Kamala Harris would agree to a Fox News debate. Now we're hearing that Brett Baer has said, well, actually, it's Donald Trump's folks that really don't want to do the Fox News debate, that Kamala Harris's folks would probably be okay with it. We'll see. That could be the case. But my point simply is that I think what Trump is doing here overall is an art of the deal situation. In other words, keeping his options open. And people will say, well, wait, he didn't keep his options open by saying no more debates. Well, he said no more debates until there are debates. So in other words, he can say that and then somehow spin it to say, look, it's now time to do a debate because of X, Y, and Z. Whatever the issue that he kind of decides it'll be, that's the reason he'll decide to do a debate. But I guarantee you, if he does a debate, it'll be on his terms, the way he wants it. So I think it works either way. Right now, by doing no more debates, remember, right now, the narrative is that Kamala Harris has agreed to a CNN debate. And Donald Trump can easily say, well, I'm not doing that. It was 3-on-1 against ABC. I'm definitely not doing CNN. So it makes sense why he said no. Everybody kind of understands it. Plus, he's done 2 presidential debates. So I don't think it hurts Trump to not do another debate. But if he starts to see those polls slipping, if he starts to get concerned, then he's got the Fox News debate in the bag, because already Kamala Harris's people, according to Brett Baer, have said that she'd be open to doing a Fox News debate. Okay, well, if that's the case, she may need a debate just as much as he may need a debate at some point. And that's where I think possibly we could have a mid to late October debate. We'll see. Once again, all speculative, but it is all about the art of the deal. And that's why I bring it up.
Yeah. And one thing for sure is, and I know people have said, I know Harris said this, like, oh, well, maybe he's afraid to do another debate or something like that. And look, I think out of all the things you can say about former President Trump, I think afraid to debate someone in public is probably the last thing on the list. I think he's proven over time that he's quite willing to say whatever's on his mind and say it directly to people.
100%. And if we had a truth serum injection into that whole conversation, it could be more like Trump's not afraid at all to do a debate. His campaign, on the other hand, maybe they might not want to do that debate. Yes. But yeah, that's probably the full story there. But Trump himself, look, he'll go debate on a street corner in New York with a hot dog in his hand. He doesn't care.
100%. All right. CBN chief political analyst David Brody, again here on Campaign Catch Up, breaking it down. We'll see you again on Monday when we do this again. Appreciate you spending your time here breaking it down for us, David. And appreciate all you watching CBN News, the YouTube channel, on the CBN News channel. God bless you all. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya. Nice podcast look, Dan, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.